When you talk about storytelling, they say we learn in three basic ways as children. Playing, which is experiencing and practicing; storytelling. They also say singing, which I guess you could even say is an extension of storytelling, because singing and songs are stories. Can you provide us some background on really the power of storytelling? Is there history or some dynamics, brain science behind why it's so powerful?
Well, it actually turns out to be the very first thing that we do individually right after we're born. I learned this recently, that right after a baby is born, it's natural, if you were just to leave the baby alone, just sitting there on the mother, that it'll actually start to make noises and start to communicate its story. It's trying to make sense, really, of all this stuff that's happening. And so from the very beginning, storytelling is basically our attempt to make sense out of what's happening in a very complex environment. And so you can see how that, from the very beginning, as we're trying to make sense and communicate, we're just needing to know and feel our way through the complexity of the world. And so, at its essence, when we give a presentation, that's really what we're asked to do, is to, from our audience, is to help them figure out what's going on here. How can we make sense out of the complexity? And the people who can do that the best are going to be the people that keep getting asked back and keep getting hired, and so on. So if we look at story then as the core thing that we do as humans is tell a story, we can really see how infused that is in everything that we do.
Everything.
Film, television, sitting around the water cooler, getting on phone calls, all day long, every day, all the time, we're really telling stories. So this is really our way of communicating. And I think a great ways to start to begin to see story is just in popular media. Turning on the television, watching a commercial, for 30 seconds, you'll see an amazing story. And that's really what we're looking at is we're not storytelling. And creating a story isn't really as complex as we might think it is, because it's everywhere around us, and including in a commercial for 30 seconds, trying to sell us something or telling a story and making a connection.
I read somewhere, I think it was A.C. Nielsen. They said that the average American, by the time they're 65, will have spent 9 years in front of the TV.
Okay.
So there's something to be said for that, right? That it's like a natural addiction of, first of all, film, these live stories, if you will, interacting, and it's how we judge, how we make sense and interpret life. When we deal with crisis management and executives, one of the things we're teaching in a command and control model is that we perceive through patterns and we interpret through stories. And so the whole idea is, what are the patterns? So we're trying to do problem analysis, decision analysis type stuff. But once we want to do something, what's your story? What do you have to tell your story through? And I think it's just a wonderful way of to be able to create change or to influence people or to educate people.
And I think it might be helpful just to demystify storytelling too. So I think it's actually built into even business, how we talk in business about communication. It's actually all the story elements are there. One way to look at story is to say that basically it's a problem solution structure, where a main character, the audience we're talking to, is facing a problem at point A. So in storytelling terms, it's the inciting incident. Something has happened to impact the main character. And then that main character wants to be at point B. They want to get somewhere else. So that gap is really now the core tension that's going to underlie the energy of the story. That there's somewhere, something has happened, they want to be somewhere else. How are they going to get from A to B? And that's really your story thread, how they get from A to B. If an organization is facing a problem, they obviously want to get somewhere else. So then that is now the grid or the structure that you can use to start your story to unfold.
Which is crisis management and business continuity management. I mean, that's all we're facing is we have a situation.
Yep.
We've got to overcome something to get to a desired end state. And we got to have a visualization process to get there. Some ways ends means, but how do we get there?
Yeah.
And then be able to encapsulate that into a story.
And it might be helpful too to there's a distinction we can make between we're talking about the big story, the structure of the presentation, and there's also little stories. This might be anecdotes, some telling, detailed story, a brief anecdote that we might tell to bring that story to life and use that within the structure of the big story. Maybe that we can call that a scene, a smaller part of the story. So it's helpful to make that discernment, because I think the word story is definitely something that's bubbling up and a lot of folks are interested in it. And there's sometimes I think we might be talking about anecdotes, smaller stories. And I think what we're really teasing out here and what we're talking about and that I describe in my book is more the big story. What is the structure for the entire thing that we're putting together to make that as engaging as possible?